This next section of the textbook talks about failures of proper bone growth, as well as leading into the hormones that are necessary for proper bone growth. The pituitary is up in the brain, and it produces growth hormone, and that growth hormone, if it's not produced in a child before puberty, that child will be very, very small. Parents can give injections to their kids of growth hormone. Now, these injections used to be taken from cadavers, but because the pituitary is up in the brain, there's a worry of the spread of mad cow disease through brain tissue, so now we produce human growth hormone through genetic recombination. Achondroplasia is, it's called achondroplasia dwarfism. It is a mutation that can occur spontaneously. So a normal-sized family can have a dwarf child, and it is a dominant trait, which means that that dwarf child has a 50% chance of having a dwarf baby and a 50% chance of having a normal-sized baby. On the left is pituitary growth failure. On the right is excessive pituitary growth hormone. Achondroplasia, a dominant trait. Other conditions are Marfan syndrome. They used to think Abraham Lincoln had Marfan syndrome because he was unusually tall. This results from too much cartilage formation in the epiphyseal region, and it causes not just long limbs, but other problems like nearsightedness and cardiovascular problems. Gigantism is the overproduction of growth hormone before puberty. This person has Marfan syndrome. A lot of volleyball and basketball players have Marfans. And here is an individual with gigantism, too much pituitary growth hormone before puberty. Which of the following disorders results in unusually short stature? Achondroplasia dwarfism. Other problems include fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, and that's odd pockets of bone tissue throughout the body. Acromegaly is too much growth hormone. Remember, that's from the pituitary gland, but too much growth hormone as an adult, and that usually you see those effects in the hands and face. Here is FOP with odd patches of bony tissue throughout the body. And here's acromegaly, too much growth hormone as an adult. And you can see with this woman how her face has changed over time. She's had an increase in the size of her jaw, her forehead, and the hands have gotten much bigger. Which of the following disorders is associated with excessive secretion of growth hormone? Acromegaly. Bones are incredibly important as a mineral reservoir, calcium, but also phosphorus and other minerals. The calcium is really important for our nerves and muscles, and so if the nerves and muscles do not get enough calcium, the body will steal it from the bones. So here you can see that 33% of bone is organic, mostly collagen. Remember, collagen is a very abundant, white, strong protein found in tendons and ligaments for strength. But in the bone itself, we have calcium, phosphate, sodium, magnesium, carbonate, potassium. Now, our levels of calcium are controlled in a variety of ways. One is in the intestines. The absorption of calcium and phosphate is controlled by hormones. Our bones are remodeled by osteoblasts and osteoclasts, and the kidneys control how much calcium and phosphate is lost in the urine. Some factors increase our blood calcium levels. For example, the parathyroid hormone. The parathyroid glands are behind the thyroid gland. There are 4 little spots on the posterior surface of the thyroid gland, and they increase blood calcium by stimulating osteoclasts to release calcium. Intestines enhances calcitriol effects and increases calcium absorption. Remember that calcitriol from the vitamin D. And kidneys increase the release of hormone calcitriol, which causes calcium reabsorption in the kidneys. Factors that decrease the blood calcium levels. So we just saw an increase in blood calcium levels by the parathyroid hormone. Now we're going to see a decrease in blood calcium levels by the thyroid gland. Calcitonin lowers calcium. Calcitonin lowers calcium. The calcitonin decreases blood calcium levels by decreasing osteoclast activity. Remember, the osteoclasts were breaking the bone down to release the calcium. The intestines decrease the absorption of calcium, and the kidneys inhibit calcitriol release and calcium reabsorption. Which of the following will occur when blood calcium level is higher than 11 milligrams per deciliter? So just think about what would happen if the calcium level is just too high. What's going to happen to lower that calcium level? Osteoclasts are inhibited. Which of the following hormones reduces blood calcium concentration? Calcitonin. So the skeleton, being the primary mineral reserve in the body, has a huge role in calcium homeostasis. It has a direct effect on the shape and the length of bones. The release of calcium into the blood weakens the bones, and the deposit of calcium salts into the bone strengthens the bones. We're going to learn a little bit about fractures. A fracture is a crack or break. Most heal as long as the blood supply and the cellular parts of the periosteum and endosteum survive. So there are certain steps to the repair of this fracture, the first being a large blood clot or fracture hematoma developing. Then 2 calluses form. There's an internal callus, which is a network of spongy bone, and an external callus, which is cartilage and bone that stabilizes the outer edge. Eventually those calluses are replaced and the dead bone is removed. The spongy bone unites the broken ends, and the cartilage of the external callus is replaced by bone. And so this shows the formation of the fracture hematoma, the external callus, the internal callus, and finally remodeling, so that this large lump in the bone would decrease in size over time. There are many types of fracture. There's 2 big categories, closed or simple versus open or compound. A closed fracture is completely internal and does not break the skin, so you don't see any bleeding. An open fracture projects through the skin, so there's a bigger chance of infection. And these are the many different types of fractures. Which of the following occurs in fracture repair? Fracture hematoma formation. Which of the following types of fractures has the highest risk of infection? A compound fracture. A tumor of the parathyroid glands that secretes too much parathyroid hormone will result in which of the following? Bones that break easily. Remember, parathyroid hormone increases blood calcium levels, so it is taking the calcium from the bones, and the bones will break more easily. What major anion binds with calcium in the bones? An anion is a negative ion. Phosphate.